to our latest New Moon Love Notes. This has been an incredibly busy month and is going to just keep on being busy. I'm recording these final notes for you a couple of days before our episode is due to come out. And that is more so because we're supposed to be getting snow/rain. Not quite sure what it's going to end up being over the next couple of days. And so I wanted to make sure that I got all of our final notes for you kind of wrapped up. But in these next couple of days, I expect to have a whole bunch of extra work done. So you'll end up hearing more about that in next month's Love Note. But there's been loads that's already happened this month, so much so that I'm probably going to forget a fair amount. So we'll just see what we manage to get pulled in here, but let's just jump right into it. So my made wardrobe this month has been a little bit chaotic. Of course, there have been the semi-intentional, but also just side effect impacts of getting the sanctuary photo shoot done, and so having some clothing come as a result of that. So we wear these cute shorts, and by we I mean me and Tawny, one of the models. And so we're wearing these cute shorts that are cotton and basically look like PJ shorts. And so I now have PJ shorts that I didn't originally, and I'm actually quite excited about those for when it's summer and I'm, it's morning and I don't feel like getting fully dressed yet, but I'm going to sit out with my coffee on the front porch and do some work out there before I, become a full human. So yeah, there's bits and pieces of that. Also, I made a pair of these Aeronite shorts. So they're a little bit wrinkly. That's because it's a linen blend that came out of the wash. And so these are, there's the front. So these are the Aeronite shorts pattern from So Liberated. Hacked into a higher waist. So I add 3 inches around the top pieces to give me a high waist that sits at my natural waist. And then I made them into shorts. And so these are pretty short shorts, but honestly, they hit me at a point that I like. And so basically they are, if you're looking to hack your own pair. I've made these enough times that it didn't terrify me to do it. But basically what I did was I added 3 inches to the rise and then I cut all of the leg pieces 2 inches below where the pockets end. And so that gives me, enough to do a little rolled hem and have a short inseam. And they're comfy. They could be like normal people clothing. They could also be PJ clothing. Secret pajamas is my general style. And so after I cut out those new pattern pieces with finally the full high rise actually included in them rather than the pair that I've always made, which just I kind of end up measuring 3 inches on top every single time. Then I ended up needing to make myself a new pair, and I have not added the waistband yet. So this is actually a good point to show you before you add that elastic waistband. It's a very large pant, and then the waistband is what pulls it in. Which is also good to keep in mind that if you're using a bulkier material, that waistband that extra fabric can get really bunchy and might not work well. So things like that are just, you pick up on it after sewing enough times or making a pattern enough times. But I'm making this blue pair out of Warp and Weft's Chore Coat fabric, and it's really nice fabric. It's very soft. I think it's going to be really comfy to wear. But I will say that because of the warp and weave, or warp and weft of the weave, you get a lot more of this happening at your edges. You have a lot more fraying happening, and so you do need to be a lot more careful about the way that your cuts are and then trimming and then making sure that you have fully enclosed seams. So everything is always here French seamed and or flat felled seamed for me. But this pair was like particularly important to do that with. And then making sure that before I was, especially for the French seams, trimming that extra fray off of the edges so that then it wasn't poking out on the outer seam once it was finished. So I still need to add in the waistband for this. I ended up having to use a bit of chambray for the pockets, and I think it actually looks pretty cute, and it's got a similar drape to the rest of it, so it works out okay because it's a pretty soft chambray. But the reason that I had to do that was because of the extra 3 inches added to the rise at the waist. I needed to have bought more fabric. If I did a regular rise to these 2 meters, this is the size 14 that I sew, 2 meters would have been enough. But because of that extra 3 inches pushing everything along that much more, I ended up not having enough to do the pocket facings. Pocket facings were fine, but the top of the pocket was not. And also the top of the pocket has 3 inches added. So yeah, that just like keep that in mind that if you're making adjustments like that, it can mean actually needing quite a bit more yardage needed for a pattern depending on what it is that you're making. So for example, I finally got my hands on a copy of the shepherd skirt pattern from Merchanton Mills, and I'm really excited to sew it, but one of the main projects that I have planned for it is to have it floor length. And so that's going to require a lot more fabric or yardage because that entire bottom skirt, which is also at the widest point of the skirt, is going to need multiple inches for every single pattern piece. So yeah, those are just like things to keep in mind of if you're sewing your own wardrobe. But part of why I am like binge sewing these pants when I am otherwise busy with a shit ton of other things is because I'm about to go teaching, and I need to wear clothes whilst teaching. Also, I need to wear clothes generally. It's too cold to not. But the black linen pants from Maywa that I have been living in and that I mended last month and showed y'all the mending from last month, I wore them multiple times after showing you that mending, put them through the wash, took them out of the wash, needed to make 3 more immediate mends to them, wore them whilst I was in the woods with Willow, came back, tossed them into the wash, and then they're essentially disintegrating on my body at this point. So I can't keep mending them because the fabric is just like disintegrating. And so prior to them fully disintegrating, at this point, I just need to get them to my friend to make a pattern out of so that then I can just sew a whole bunch more. And then I'm currently wearing a pair of Aaronites, the other ones that I had mended the crotch in. And I am living in perpetual fear of the exact same thing happening with these. And I don't really have another pair of pants. So yeah, I personally find it kind of hard, especially as like somebody who works within like slow fashion, sustainable textiles, makes all my own clothing. So it takes, I have to consider the amount of time it takes to make clothing most of the time. And so I'm always loath to retire a piece of clothing or to admit that it is past the point of being able to mend. If it's still in mendable condition, I can put it in the mending pile and forget about it, but at least still feel like it's not dead yet. But when it gets to the point where it truly is past the point of repair, that is a really hard spot emotionally for me to sit with at this point in time. And I'm being forced to do it with those black linen pants. So yeah, they have lived not even a year, but I have basically lived in them day in and day out, and very begrudgingly will not wear them on other days when I absolutely have to wash them. So, they've lived a decent life, and at this point just need to be made into a pattern, because if I were to wear them any longer, they will just disintegrate on my body and I won't be able to get a pattern out of them. So making myself a new pair of Aaronites in the interim. These will probably be finished later today. And then I'll wear them, and then maybe I'll have some photos of wearing them whilst I'm teaching for you to see next month. But that's what's been happening in my maid wardrobe this month. I have had very little on my needles this month because I've been so fucking busy dealing with final bits and bobs for the project or for the photo shoot, and then also getting ready for teaching. But what I do have currently on my needles, take a spot. There you go. Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay. What I do have on my needles is a pair of the Lover's socks. And this is my Slavic sock yarn and a Black Knight Scabiosa dye pot. I think this was the second, or like the first exhaust, but the second bath from a bath. And so it's turning out really beautifully. You can't, I'm not getting closer to the screen, but you can't really see the stitches, but if you were to see them, you can very easily see the stitches. And I have plans for them to eventually end up in a different photo shoot / a future book. But I, in the interim, will be including them in that plant installation display that I'll be doing later this fall. And so it's also like the other things that I have on my immediate to-do list for knitting involve sweaters, and I still need to do the math for grading. So I always appreciate having a sock pattern on my needles that I can just kind of plug away at and fill my time. So at this point, I'm at the art shaping, which is honestly pretty good considering how busy my time has been recently, and how my making time has been taken up with so many other projects. But yeah, it's coming along. I'm liking it. It shows off the stitch really well. I'm really enjoying working with this yarn. And maybe by the time I check in with you next month, it will be completed. So that's what's been on my needles this month. So as far as natural dyeing goes, this month has had a whole bunch of last minute things done for the sanctuary photo shoot, including this lovely pillow. I'm going to include some of the stills from our shoot so that you can see a bunch of the very lovely berry colored palette that was included. My plan is to figure out a way of, and I haven't totally decided on how this is 100% going to work, whether it only lives in the Sanctuary Hub itself in the Creative Coven community, and or if it will be included for supporters of the crowdfund when we open that up next month. But my plan is to kind of pull together the recipes that I used to dye the different things for Sanctuary's photo shoot and make that available for folks. So keep an eye out to see where that ends up living. But it's a really lovely berry colored shoot in general. Everything's kind of rose colored glasses. And so much of my dyeing ended up being using like madder and Brazil wood and things like that. So I also did some ice dyeing thanks to working with a workshop with Cara Marie Piazza and Botanical Colors about natural ice dyeing, and that was super cool. It does not work for wool, which makes me sad, but works particularly well on silk and also on cellulose fibers. And so I ended up doing a bunch of ice dyeing for the base outfits that some of the models wore for the photo shoot. And then also made a really sweet quilted wall hanging that uses some fabric dyed with it. So yeah, I'm really excited about what the potential is going to be as I experiment more with that and learn and understand a little bit more about the ice dyeing and how it kind of works in its best forms with the structures that I have here and the methods that I employ. But Considering how much of the year we are under snow, it's very exciting to think of some ways of using said snow. That doesn't just involve needing to very slowly melt snow into pots. If you have ever tried using snow for your natural dye pots, you know how much snow and how long it takes to melt it down to actually have enough to then dye something with. It's not this like cute casual thing. It's not like you just like swing your pot through and now you have enough. Like it takes a bajillion years, which is not particularly functional. And honestly takes like a lot more snow even for somebody in Winnipeg than is kind of reasonable for more than like one project. But it's an interesting concept in terms of water use. On that note, I grabbed a couple more books for my natural dye library. And I say on that note because one of them is called Paul Gou's 157 Colors, and it's from Dominique Cardon. It's her most recent book, and it is 157 traditional natural dye recipes. And it's fascinating. It's totally bilingual all the way through in English and in French. And it has 157 traditional recipes. And it's fascinating, but what I have noticed so far in flipping through, because I haven't given it a solid deep dive yet, is that the vast majority of them really rely on a tin mordant to get the colors. And of course, that's under the conditions and the water usage and all of that they are using. So if I were to also recreate all of these recipes using the things that they have done, I would end up with different colors because my water is different. All of those factors are different. And also we don't use tin anymore. And so while there's so much value in, looking at these old traditional dye recipes and recreating them and understanding them, for anybody who's not, an historic academic and or a total nerd in natural dyeing, it's not that it's not useful, but there is a gap, in my opinion, in where the industry is currently sitting as far as, figuring out, okay, yeah, these were these old recipes, and they are often really reliant on tin mordants and chrome mordants and these things that we now know are toxic for the humans working with them, toxic for the environment, really not sustainable. And so as modern natural dyers, if we are trying to create a new color palette, especially for commercial use, then what does that look like when we are not reliant on these things, and kind of keeping those factors in mind, because I think also for a lot of the public, there's so much general confusion about natural dyes and what is involved in taking care of them and how difficult it is, but it's not actually. And people doing color fast tests or light fastness tests and putting things under conditions that, in 3 months, yes, okay, this has faded dramatically. But in reality, if you were to wear a piece of clothing, it would take years to have that same level of fading happen. And so this fear of, well, what if it fades, is like, it's not that it's not valid, but there are so many factors that go into it that are worth talking about. And also in reality, in real life, to get that level of fading, if you've done the job properly, even if you're using something that is slightly more fugitive, it's still going to take a shit ton of time. And so we don't actually need to worry about it in the way that people have this like anxiety around having something that's been naturally dyed. And also the concern about, well, but natural dyes, aren't they toxic? So much of that is rooted in the traditional recipes that relied on toxic mordants. And so it's not that natural dyes are automatically safe across the board or that you can do anything with them. We know that that is not the case, but they are not nearly as toxic as the old recipes were, if we're using them now. And so I think that there's like a lot of just kind of general missing conversations in both natural dyeing circles and in general public circles that is really worth us kind of examining more and talking more about, if we're wanting to shift natural dyes more into the general population. So really excited about this book because I'm going to nerd out with it. And also it's just got my brain thinking about how do we kind of translate things like this into being useful for the general public. And whether or not that's actually necessary, I don't know. But as a natural dye nerd, I'm really excited about this. And then the other book that I got is called Gampol, and it is the second volume, and it's from the Philippine Textile Research Institute. And I'm very happy I got a copy of this thanks to connections from my friend Lourdes. And so it's a book all about different natural dyes used across the Philippines, what the plant is used for, what the dye recipes are, how it grows. It's just a really cool, good little book that is region specific. Definitely convenient considering how many of the kids that I teach are Filipino. And I'm just really excited to have it in my library, particularly because right now I'm heading into the public schools, and truly so many of the kids are Filipino. One of my schools, literally half of my students are, and so I just think that there's so much benefit in having resources for them that are ancestrally relevant, and also, you know, are things that are, you know, family members might be like, oh yeah, we've got some of that growing. So, you know, if they want to play with a local color palette of, you know, family members, then they can do that even if they're now living in a totally different climate. Also, there's a fair amount of overlap in the plants that are growing. So I think that's also cool. So both of those books were a great little recent addition. And then the other thing that is very exciting that I just wanted to kind of pop in at the end here, before I then show you my seeds that are coming along really nicely at this point. For the most part, it's been a slow start, but some of the plants are doing really well. And the snow has finally melted, although we might have snow in the next few days, so who knows. But I ended up getting from my friend Jennifer about 1.5 kilos of Black Knight Scabiosa, and from last season, and she'd frozen it, and so she was like, just pop it all in your pot now before it has a chance to either dry out or refreeze or whatever, just stick it in. And so I did, and currently there's more stuff in the dye pots downstairs, but I just wanted to show you all this incredible silk velvet that I dyed, and it's this incredible blue teal that is just so stunning. And so the lap quilt that I made for Sanctuary that I shared in last month's video, my plan is to make a similar one for this plant installation that I'm working on. There will be kind of a first showing of it at Manitoba Fiberfest this year, and I'm hoping to just kind of keep on building it, waiting on grants to find out about that. Which, speaking of which, I can't remember if I had found out this in time for last month, but I ended up getting the residency grant for Riding Mountain at the Deep Bay Cabin this summer, thanks to Manitoba Arts Council. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to be able to make the quilt from last year's dye plant colors. So that's really, really exciting. And then I'm going to have basically kind of a bedroom wardrobe scene available by the time Fiberfest comes along. So I'm really excited about that, but I'm also just really excited about how incredible this color is. I was hoping I'd be able to recreate it after I got a similar shade with the first test batch that I did for Black Knight Scabiosa, and I did, and so yeah, I don't know, I'm really excited about this color in particular. Also totally fits in with the color palette for the next book that I'm working on, which Samson and I kind of determined that we need a buffer book for Sanctuary that we've just are wrapping up now, and then there's going to eventually be a book of wedding patterns, but we, after discussing it while he was still here, there needs to be a buffer book between creating, you know, like Sanctuary for yourself at home and having a wedding book. So I'm really excited about that one. And as soon as he mentioned it, I realized that I'd basically been building it in the back of my head kind of unconsciously, and kind of immediately was like, oh yeah, here's its shape. And so it's very fresh at this point. It needs a little bit more time to percolate, but the color palette felt like kind of an immediate, like, oh, this is the color palette and this is the color palette. So I'm really excited about that. And I will maybe have another lap quilt show you after I head to my different teaching gigs over the next little bit, because I will be away from home and will have some crafting time in the evenings when I am done teaching each day. So that's it for my dye pots this month. It's been a busy one and has been really satisfying. So that's nice. So I've finally started my plant babies at the very end of March, which is late for a lot of places, but we also have not gone above 0 degrees this March, and we don't put things into the ground until the end of May, so it's not as big of a deal as in other locations. That's the fun of zone 3. So as you can see, I've got a variety of plant babies between dye plants, medicinal plants, and then these are all dye plants in their Jiffy pods in here. And I actually need to change the bottom catcher thing so that they are sitting in water better. But I've got a mix of Jiffy pods, and then also these ones with soil. And last year, my best results actually came from this very simple tray up here. But I still have more seeds to plant, so I will be doing more Jiffy pods, and then also more of these pots. And some of my seeds are going to end up needing to go into the fridge, so they'll get seeded into smaller flats and put into the fridge for several weeks. Others, I am doing my kitchen herbs, which I'll show you over here. So we've got a whole bunch of kitchen herbs, and they are primarily just going to take turns moving in and out of my my Miracle-Gro station to get them started. And then once they are started and strong, but not totally reliant on the hydroponic system, I'm going to then transfer them into small pots and have a little indoor herb garden growing. So my goal this year is to be establishing more of my beds, and then also to be establishing indoor like culinary and medicinal herbs, tea herbs and things like that, and then some of my simpler dye plants as well. And then these babies have all been seeded, but I have remaining seeds. And in some cases, these seed packs are a couple of years old. So my plan is to just direct sow the remaining seeds between the various beds that I'm using. And we'll see what takes. I find that sometimes, honestly, just popping the seeds directly into the ground, even though we do have a short growing season, ends up resulting in stronger babies, and or at the very least, it just kind of extends the harvesting season, because I have the ones that were seeded in their flats that bloom earlier, and then these guys kind of catch up later in the season. So this is where we're at. I've got a little bit of organizing to do, but it feels good to have my hands in the soil. Are you coming up? Come on up. Here, let me shift up. Come on up. Fit. Come on. Thank you. I know. There you go. Yeah, good girl. So Boss Witch life this month has been totally wild because I have been dealing with the sanctuary photo shoot, and at the same time also needing to, finish dealing with taxes, which I still need to finish dealing with, writing and getting grants, which has been very exciting to get a couple of those grants, and then also getting ready to go into teaching mode. And so I've already started with one of my schools. As of next week, I'll be doing another one of the residencies, and then I'm home for a week and then back out, getting the seeds started for this year's dye gardens. It's been a very, very busy month. And so honestly, I kind of forget where things started or were left off last month and where we're at now, because I've just been kind of buried in the midst of it. But the sanctuary photo shoot has been kind of a major factor. Getting the test knitting sorted out really got going this month. And then we are going to be doing the crowdfunding campaign to get Sanctuary printed, and that's going to be happening in May. So check the show notes, because we're going to have the link to either the Indiegogo page directly, if I can get a draft page up and published, or if you just go to ashalberg.com/sanctuary, then at the top of that page, it will show you where the Indiegogo is, and then if you're watching this at a later date, that Indiegogo is going to run from May 1st to 31st of this year, 2023. And so if you're watching this at a later date, then that page should still be updated with where you can actually buy the book. And so I'm really excited to be moving this book through these final stages. When we got the photos done, I just kept saying to Samson, "Ooh, we've leveled up this time." Like it's a completely different vibe and quality. Even though like all of the other works that we've done have been, I think, really beautiful, this one feels just like a whole nother level. And so I'm really excited to share it with everyone. I think it's beautiful. I think Samson did an incredible job of bringing this vision to life. And I'm really excited to see it in like physical form when we have the books printed. And so I'm going to be, hopefully pre-Mercury retrograde kicking in later this week, able to get a decent amount of the launch collateral written and pre-scheduled and drafts made, and pull together a first draft of the complete book, and minus the finished patterns. And so, yeah, it's all just, it's really exciting and a little bit overwhelming just because there's so much to do. But I kind of wouldn't have it any other way. Hi. As you can see, Willow's doing much better, so that's exciting. And you get to spend a lot of time with your grandparents because I'm away so much, which is not my favorite, but that's what happens. And so another thing that's kind of coming up, that also came as a result of spending some extra time with Samson and then having some really good chats after he got back home, is that there's a bit of an overhaul required, I think, for not necessarily for the business itself, especially for you folks. If you're, here to follow along with like my making adventures and whatever Willow is up to, and buying yarn or whatever like that doesn't need to change. But I do think that there needs to be um, some, I guess, freshening up or updates made about me in general and all of the different things that I do, and kind of where I'm at now in my career. And the business is one portion of that for sure. It's a very large portion of that, but it also, like, if we're being honest, the reason that this business exists is because there was not another way for me at the time that I was getting started to be able to make my art and make a living off of it. And so it's always come down to, how do I support making these weird worlds that I like creating? And so Sanctuary is one example of those worlds. This plant installation is another one of the worlds that I'm working on. Each of my books has always been its own little world. The Creative Coven community is a world in and of itself. And I think that's always been kind of at the heart of the work that I do. And very much that comes from being somebody from theater and from collaborative devising world. And so now, I'm 10 years out from my advanced degrees. The 5-year Biziversary is coming up this summer. And so it's time to kind of give a bit of a clearer retrospective as well as general portfolio about, like, here's what I do. Here are all of the different ways that folks can engage with me. And so if you're here to buy yarn, 100% here it is. Or if you want to grab patterns, this is where you can get those patterns. But also, if you are looking to support some of the more conceptual projects, here's how you can do that. If you are interested in supporting the next book baby, here are the best ways to do that. If you're curious about what those next projects are that are coming up, here's where you can find information. So I think there's going to be a website overhaul that happens in the next couple of months. So if you check the website on a semi-regular basis, don't be shocked when that happens. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that all of the hyperlinks behave themselves when things eventually migrate over. But I think it's time for that. It's been 5 years. And yeah, we're just like moving on to the next level of things, or the next stepping stone of whatever this path is. Also I had my birthday this month. I'm 33. It feels like a very magical year. And also is kind of that like point where I think for a lot of folks who are older than me, whenever I'm like, I feel like I'm in the middle of an existential crisis of sorts, people are like, yes, that makes sense for where you are in your 30s. I'm like, okay, cool. So that's where things are mostly at. And now I'm going to flood your feed with some behind the scenes footage from the Sanctuary shoot and some other stuff. So enjoy that.
You're gonna go. I'm loving the angle
this looks
of the
really
pink.
good.
Yeah, this is good. The little socks poking in. This is great. This is good. So you're gonna have a seat here.
Okay. Just realized that I have a hair held in my hand at the bottom. One of the things that really excites me about moving forward with Sanctuary is being able to move on from it to next projects. And so if you are in the Creative Coven community, you already know that the hub exists. the Sanctuary Hub to take you behind the scenes of that book. But I'm going to keep on doing that for future books too. And so here's a little sneak peek of a transition that we'll be doing. So another thing that's been happening for Boss Witch Mode, it's been such a crazy month. I just like the amount that I've been doing this month is kind of wild and feels like it's been like 3 different months in and of themselves, which like for a normal person probably would be 3 different months. But the Creative Coven online design course has had its full refresh, and all of the videos are now refreshed. Newly recorded, updated, fully captioned. So accessibility is exponentially better than it was before. There's a new workbook. There's a freshened list of resources. I'm just really proud of how that course is now looking. It's 6 years old now from its original iteration. And so I've been happy with it, but it definitely felt like, especially those earliest videos, I just needed to feel like it made sense with where things are at now in terms of the industry, and also just aligned better with how we learn online these days. Post-pandemic made a big difference, or pandemic / post-lockdown life has made a difference. So that course is, of course, available 24/7. Doors are open. And as of April 27th, we're going to be going into 8 weeks of, We're going to be going into 8 weeks of weekly co-working sessions to help folks get their patterns out in a timely fashion ahead of summer, and actually plow through the content, so that if you need that kind of help and support in getting yourself kind of situated in an online course. I know that for some folks the self-paced is what's so ideal about it, and also for others, and also for sometimes folks that, like me, I love a self-paced course, but I do find that having a little bit of structure and accountability is helpful for me to actually get through the content. And so that's the purpose of what these weekly co-works are going to be. After that, we'll be going back to our regular monthly co-working sessions. But yeah, I'm really excited about being able to help folks actually get patterns out in time for the summer months, and that we managed to get that done. And by we, I mean me. I keep on saying we, but it's literally like me and Willow as my moral support, which is important. But yeah, there's been a lot happening behind the scenes, and I feel like I have not necessarily like given myself full credit internally about how much I've been getting done lately, and that it's still at like a good quality that I feel good about. So that feels really great. So yeah, you can check that out. Links, of course, are in the show notes. If you want to get started on being your own knitwear designer, whether it's a full-time gig or a solid side gig while you keep your corporate benefits plan. Oh, witch life this month has been lovely and exhausting, and somehow I've managed to fit it in amongst many very large projects coming to fruition. There's a little bit of stuff that you'll see from when I was in the woods with Willow a couple of weeks ago. It was her first like actual outing since before her surgery. And as you can see, she's back on the couch with me, which is exciting. She's been hanging out with her grandparents and doing really well off leash for the last week. We're staying on leash in the city just because there's a lot more distractions than at my parents' place, other than rabbits. Although there was a rabbit out front this morning that she then chased away from my blackberries, so I appreciated that. Yeah, she's coming along really, really well, which is great. Makes me really happy. And it's nice to be able to get our walks out again, and especially now that things have melted, we can actually walk safely. So it's certainly helping my mental health, and I suspect it's helping hers. And so we're gonna go and get ready to do that pretty soon. But it's been a pretty good month. Lots of kind of big life questions rolling around in my head, and also reaffirming decisions that I've been making, which is cool. I've been pulling tarot a fair amount lately, which is always good, and just trying to kind of get back into my healthy habits. So yeah, it's been a good month. Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining me this month, and I appreciate you tuning in. And please, 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 when the Sanctuary crowdfunding opens in about a week and a half, it's going to be running from May 1st to May 31st. Please support it. Please share it with your friends. Feel free to, buy copies of the book via the pre-order for all of your best knitting buddies and or kitchen buddies or whoever. And I can definitely guarantee you that this will be the best way to get a copy of the book, because not only will you be getting a copy of the book, but you will also be getting a copy of the ebook in advance, whilst we are waiting on the printing to come along. We need quite a lot of money, honestly, to get the book printed. So it's really, really important for us for this crowdfund to do really well, for us to be able to take it through final steps. But we have the photos now. If nothing else, if everything else goes completely sideways because Mercury retrograde decides to completely fuck us over, we will have at the very least an ebook available for you by the end of the crowdfunding campaign. So please, please, please make sure to keep an eye out for that and to support it. And the best part about it is that you'll be getting the book at a certain price. But if we end up upgrading the printing, you will still get that upgraded version at that price, whereas everybody else is going to have to pay what the upgraded printing is actually going to require for us sales-wise. So it's going to be the best way to get a copy of the book. It's going to be the best way for you to get one of the first copies of the book. If we end up honestly selling out via the pre-orders and it doesn't make sense to print more, that's what we're going to go with. I am really hoping that it goes really well. There's also oodles of other fabulous perks at all different price points. It's also going to be your only opportunity in honestly the foreseeable future to get a copy of the ebook on its own. So if you don't want to pay for shipping, maybe you live overseas, you're not interested in dealing with that shipping, but you do want a copy of Sanctuary, this will be your opportunity to get that. I have zero guarantees that we're ever going to make that ebook available in the future. And if we do, it's going to be far in the future. I have honestly a bit of a hatred of making ebooks available as soon as the print copies are available, because I feel like it semi defeats the purpose of going to print if you know that you're going to be going to print. Printing just costs a shit ton of money, and so being able to deal with that is kind of the ideal situation. So yeah, that's kind of everything for now, and we'll see you next month. Ooh, also, you are going to see, if you are subscribed to this channel, great. If you are not subscribed to this channel, please do. And what you're actually going to be seeing between now and our next New Moon Love Note is actually recordings from last year when we launched the Sanctuary Hub for the Creative Coven community. I did a series of interviews via Instagram Live with a bunch of my favorite humans about their definitions of sanctuary. And so we just talked about that, and we had some really fabulous chats. And so I have been downloading those, and by downloading them, I mean Instagram is a pain in the ass. And so I've literally been screen recording them while they play in full. And I'm going to be adding them here to this channel so that then you can watch them here on YouTube. So you're going to see those recordings made available in May to go along with our Sanctuary crowdfund. So if you miss them on Instagram or you hate watching things on Instagram, they're pretty long chats. They're like, 1 to 2 hours long. and so you don't want to watch them via that platform, you'll be able to watch them here. So keep an eye out for those. And again, if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. And thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.